got a PS2.
Picture this, it's 1994.
Oh man.
And buzz about Nintendo's next step in the home console market is heating up again, specifically how it'll utilize 64-bit hardware, making the upcoming 32-bit consoles look absolutely pitiful by comparison. Everyone then collectively decided to save their time and money for Nintendo's next big home system, and that's how the Nintendo 64 sold more units than there are people on Earth. Or at least that's what Nintendo was probably hoping for, as I'm sure we're all used to hearing a million times over that didn't happen. Sony's first full console, the PlayStation, would release just around 2 full years before the N64. Although its launch sales seemed shaky at first, the PlayStation quickly proved that it was more than capable of leading this new generation of home systems. And guess what?
I have one. For a good while, my most used old as dirt game console was this PlayStation 1, and I absolutely love this thing.
There's so many good games on here that I got to experience on their original hardware, or for the first time ever. Games like Spyro, Legend of Mana, Tony Hawk, and no, not you, Get Out. While this was all well and good, I knew there were so many more good games out there just waiting to be played out in the mystical world of a whole-ass flight tower. Jesus Christ, this thing is massive. Naturally, after the roaring success of the PlayStation, Sony had to make a follow, but I'm not sure why I'm trying to drum up suspense here. You all know what it is, it's the PlayStation 2. I'd bet like, I don't know, $2 on that? While it was beaten to launch by about a year by Sega's Dreamcast and faced steep competition shortly after by the Xbox and GameCube, Sony proved that lightning could in fact strike the same place twice, which I guess isn't that weird. I mean, we have an entire thing dedicated to making that happen.
Around 24 years after its release, I thought I'd finally start getting around to joining the red-hot discussion surrounding the PS2. Anyone there? I bought the bouncer.
Pretty soon after getting it and building up a small library, this console quickly became my go-to system as of late.
Turns out I really like this thing. Weight problem, vague cigarette smell, and belonging to a guy named Michael and all. Why did I and so many more people before me end up absolutely falling in love with this thing?
Well, reason number one, it had games.
But I hate video games!
Like a lot of them. Probably too much in all honesty. How were consumers supposed to keep up? To this day, the PS2's library is still considered to be one of the absolute best, not only because of its absolute beehives worth of games, but because a lot of those bees were really good-ass bees. Point proven. However, I don't know shit about most of the games people like on this thing, so we're gonna be looking at the games I've been playing on this old B&E tool. Recently, I've been trying to step outside my gaming comfort zone a little bit more, play games that I normally wouldn't, and make a better effort to push through the games that I'm not really feeling, and the PS2 has been great for that. I played Devil May Cry. I don't normally play games like this, and I'm not really fully sure I enjoyed myself, but hey, I played it. Now, don't get me wrong, when DMC is good, it is awesome, but keyword here is when it's good. The best parts about this game have this sort of self-indulgent but endearing edge to them that makes it really fun to watch. However, the game hardly tries to tell a story, so you won't be seeing too much of that, sadly. This game is mainly focused on the combat, and when it all comes together, it's pretty great. It's got this real good sense of snappy momentum to it, especially after you unlock the flame gauntlets. I love these things. Keyword there being when. Sometimes required enemies will just hang out in the walls for however long they feel like while your health is constantly draining. Sometimes Dante just feels like locking onto the wrong thing. Sometimes you have to fight Pile of Goo, my favorite boss in video game history. I especially like how you have to fight this guy 3 times. I do find a lot of the stuff you'll actually be fighting in the game to be pretty hit or miss. More specifically, the bosses. The game's basically got 4 main bosses you're gonna have to fight about 3 times each, and the quality of these things ranges wildly. You can go from the genuinely great fights against the Black Knight to the aforementioned Pile of Goo, which I hate. You've also got Big Spider and Bird. I don't remember their actual names, but they're okay. As mentioned before, the Black Knight fights are easily the best, and they do a good job exemplifying what works about this combat system. I've always loved bosses where you and your opponent are of equal size. It allows there to be a really good sense of flow to the fight. You push the boss back, and the boss fights back in a way that feels natural. Something that's always mattered to me a lot in combat is the sense that my attacks are doing real damage. Does the enemy reel back if I land a good hit? Is there a satisfying sound effect? Do I get the feeling that my attack is actually colliding with something instead of just passing through an uncaring wall? These are things that the bosses in this game are kinda hit or miss at. I also don't know what it is with PS2 era action games and making you do infrequent bad platforming, but I do not like it. It sucks here and it sucks in most of them, especially with the camera angle constantly changing. That's another interesting quirk about this game. It utilizes fixed camera angles instead of a dynamic camera. This is most definitely a holdover from this game's background as an early build of Resident Evil 4. Now, most of the time, I actually quite like the fixed camera here. It really adds to the atmosphere, which is something that this game does pretty well. But in some scenarios, scenarios, it can switch angles at really inopportune times and it just becomes a pain. Although there's something else I gotta praise this game for, and that's its structure. It all pretty much takes place in this one castle, again probably a holdover from it being Resi 4 early on. And despite all the missions being laid out linearly, as you get a bit more into the game you can explore a good amount of the castle in each mission. However, I never found myself getting lost. It strikes a good balance of not railroading the player while letting them explore and being clear on where they need to go. The interconnected nature of the missions in this game is something that I really love about it. At least until they traded out all this intricacy for dark flesh chambers near the end of the game, which is coincidentally the title of my new album.
Wait, can you pause the mini Devil May Cry review for a bit? I just got this threatening letter. To whomever it may concern, please stop talking about Devil May Cry right this instant, or there will be consequences. That's easy. I was already gonna do that. Also, why is there a coupon for Breyer's ice cream here?
Apart from the aforementioned Devil May Cry, tons more iconic series got their start right here on the PS2, and if they didn't, they definitely started unlocking their full potential. Grand Theft Auto immediately comes to mind. While the series started on the previous console generation with the PS1, its next-gen entries are definitely what shot it into the gaming mainstream. Emphasis on shot. It was during this generation where the series traded out its signature top-down view for a more grounded third-person camera, which lets you get all up close and personal with all that jaywalking and homicide. Now, I'd love to go more in depth with these games, talking about my own memories and personal experiences with them, but I was never allowed to play them growing up. Oh man, I wonder why. I'm an adult now and I'm still afraid my mom's gonna confiscate this. Now, I know what you all might be thinking, Iggy, these games came out on Xbox and PC too. They're not suited for video on Sony's hit video game console, the PlayStation 2. How could you make such a glaring oversight? And to that I say, shut up, that really hurts my feelers. And also, despite these games being multi-platform, I still mostly associate them with the PS2. This is the console that everyone had at the time, and these are the games that everyone had to play. Do the math.
I'm busy, you do it.
Also, these games still did release on PS2 first, so haha, I win, you look so stupid right now.
Before I get hunted down and put in timeout for playing this, let's quickly move on to another game on the PS2 I've been playing. Unrelated, but I'm also a pathological liar.
In 2002, the world saw the release of Kingdom Hearts, and it was never the same again.
Oh well, hot damn! Goofy's here!
For what the series would eventually become, it's kinda weird looking back at a time where this was really all there was. I went into this series only really knowing their reputation of having an absolutely batshit insane plot, and while that is definitely true by a certain point in the series, the first game's story is actually pretty easy to understand. If you view it from the lens of it being a standalone game, which you will if you play this one first. The game itself is a crossover between Final Fantasy and Disney, and as someone who couldn't care less about Final Fantasy or Disney, I did not expect to enjoy this game as much as I did. Now, for full transparency's sake, I initially played this game on the PS4's all-in-one collection instead of the PS2, and that was a good bit before I actually got my PS2. So no, this doesn't really count as a game I've been playing on PS2, but I did say I was a pathological liar, although I do want to touch on this game for a little bit just because it is very interesting. This here is an action RPG following everyone's favorite Disney characters, like Donald, Goofy, those dogs from that one dog movie, these bastards, and this kid. You fly around to all these different Disney worlds in order to seal their keyholes and stop the spread of darkness. I know you've all got one question on your minds, don't worry, I've got you covered, you get to all the different worlds on the Gummy Ship, get with the program. That's a pretty big oversimplification of the plot, but that's all you really need to know for the purposes of this video. The worlds themselves are all really fun to explore and feel pretty distinct from one another. I'd assume they did a pretty good job at making them all feel like the movies they're based on. I wouldn't know, I've seen maybe 4 Disney movies in my lifetime, and one of them I ran out of the room crying as soon as it started. I don't know why. Unrelated, but this game would be great for conquering any childhood fears of the movie The Little Mermaid you might have. The combat here is pretty great as well. While it's not nearly as fast or flashy as subsequent games in the series, I find the more methodical pace this game takes to work just as well. It is worth mentioning that this version of the game doesn't have all the slight improvements added in the final mix release, so if you're looking for the most complete Kingdom Hearts experience, you're not gonna find it here. But if you like playing the original releases of games like I do, then definitely check this game out. It's still Kingdom Hearts, and it's still a lot of fun.
Apart from what I've played or been playing, the library on this thing is the closest I've seen a console library come to feeling truly endless. If I just keep listing off all the noteworthy games on here, I'd be here all year.
Just off the top of my head, we got Ratchet & Clank, God of War, Sly Cooper, Final Fantasy X, the various Shin Megami Tensei and Persona games, Shadow of the Colossus and Gingerbread Man, and many more. With such a monstrous install base, of course there'd be an equally monstrous library to capitalize on that. However, with the release of the PS3 in late 2006, you wouldn't be blamed for thinking the releases would slow down. However, this console wasn't allowed to go peacefully as it was still getting games as late as 2013, what the hell? Even to this day, I've still been seeing sealed PS2 games at Rite Aid of all places.
Speaking of games that came out after the PS3, I've got one more series of games that I'd like to look at, or more specifically, part of a series.
This here is the .hack GU trilogy, a series of games that I've been working my way through recently. At the time of writing this, I'm nearing the end of Reminisce, and I just really want to talk about this series, even if it's just for a brief moment. Before you ask, no, I have not played the original .hack quadrology. I'd like to say there's some deeper reason behind that other than the store only had a copy of Volume 1 of GU, but sometimes life is just boring like that. Despite not playing the original series, I don't feel all too lost in terms of the general plot, but what do I know?
I literally can't.
I do want to get around to playing the original series eventually, I just gotta see how much that would cost.
I'm gonna stick with GU for now.
Which I'm pretty fine with. From where I'm at so far, these games are so damn cool. The game's got this entire fake internet you can lurk around in, watching all these different recurring characters post on all different types of forums. Whether it's discussing where to find certain rare items, talking about recent plot events from the lens of an outsider, or just posting cool art. There's news sites reporting on developments out in the real world, as well as this animated show that gets periodically updated as the game goes on. It's not very good, but they took the time to animate this, that's really cool. Pretty much none of the news except for a few select examples has any consequence on the main plot, but the fact that the team went this far for what's essentially flavor text is incredible. For hours I found myself reading through all these forum posts and news articles, treating the game more like a visual novel than the action RPG that it is. From the second volume on, there's even a whole ass card game you can mess around with as well. It's not super in-depth because it runs in the background, but much like the forum posts and news articles, it does an amazing job at establishing the world and people living in it. And all this is essentially just background information you don't need to interact with, because this game is, like stated before, primarily an action RPG, and a pretty decent one at that. The main combat's solid enough, but nothing you're gonna be writing home about. Kinda button mashy at times, but the Rengeki system does a good enough job at incentivizing you to not just spam your most powerful skills whenever you can. The story here is pretty interesting, but it can be meandering as hell sometimes, especially in the second volume. Plot developments that should only take about 30 minutes are drawn out to hell and back. I'd need like 5 whole hands in order to count the amount of times the game told me to log out and check my email address 10 minutes after it already told me to do that.
And I've only got 2!
You'll constantly be met with messages stopping the story in its tracks, telling you to join this character for a mission that has utterly zero consequence. To be fair, sometimes they do yield character interactions and growth, but other times nothing happens other than your time being wasted. When it's actually in the mood to tell its story, it is pretty engaging, but don't expect to be on the edge of your seat the whole time. Overall, I do still highly recommend this trilogy if anything I said made it sound interesting, at least at the point where I'm at. These games also have a modern port on Windows, PS4, and Switch, so they're pretty accessible, especially compared to the original series. What makes these games so much more interesting to me is that the second and third volumes were released after the PS3, with the first volume being released in the last few months of the PS2's life. I've always found it super interesting to look at a console's release lineup after its successor has already come out. For the most part, you're just gonna find sports games, but some of them are real gems.
So that's a brief look at the vast library of games that the PS2 housed, or more specifically, what I have been playing, as that's what I have the most to say about. I'm sorry, but I don't have that much to say about Mouse Police at the point I'm at in life right now. Even at just a glance at this thing's library, you can immediately tell why this thing won that generation's console wars in whatever a more severe version of a landslide is. However, that wasn't the only thing the PS2 had going for it.
Backwards compatibility, everyone likes it, and I do mean everyone. The PS1 was already an absolute breakout success, so making it successor compatible with its gargantuan library of games only made sense, which added a whole nother layer to why you'd want to buy this thing even nowadays. You could play GTA 3 and Mort the Chicken in one place.
About damn time.
Now, this definitely wasn't the main reason people were buying a PS2 during this generation, but it sure as hell made the deal all the sweeter. Much like the ability to disappoint my parents. The PS2 has built-in DVD playback, which absolutely helps its broad appeal. How do you sell the console that can't play Blinks to your average Joe Schmo?
Tell them they can use it to watch porn.
Movies. I know this is gonna sound pretty weird for this day and age, but I actually use my PS2 to watch DVDs more frequently than you might think. How else would I watch the cinematic masterpiece that is Spy Kids 3?
Okay, now that's everything I wanted to touch on with this system. From its ability to play DVDs, basically making it a no-brainer purchase for anyone who is interested in a DVD player and video games, to its ability to play the PS1's phenomenal library of games, making it a great purchase for anyone who wasn't already invested in the PlayStation brand at the time, to its own library chock full of beloved classics and relatively unknown gems, it's not hard to see why the PS2 succeeded the way it did. And hey, with this being my first job after joining that shady company, I get paid for the first time. Seems like they just sent over the money in this plastic bag. Must just be how they pay their employees. Let's see what they sent. Huh.